people, and it'll all be able to herd equally. I did test it. Right, it's telling me I'm live. Quick minute of bull crap. How's that?
Here we go. Before we continue, RIP headphone users.
Yeah, RIP headphone users. Well, we're about to find out on the iPad. Come on. There we go. I am live. You are lying. Come on. Yep, now it's come up just as I closed the app. That's hilarious. Always seems to happen. How's that?
Here we go. Before we continue,
yeah,
RIP
it sounds good to me.
Yeah.
I'm going to mute the iPad and let's play the intro jingle properly.
The whole Liam Kumar Deer thing, not really happened.
Nigel couldn't make it.
Yeah.
I rang up Mendenhall, he said he could make it.
Don't think this whole Phil, credit to the guy, he's always managed to do well what he has, but he is a shocking personality. You guys got a trophy? No.
It was pre-vim.
No, my life from Richard Mendenhall.
I'm a tag jack! I'm a fucking tag!
Hello and welcome to the LOC Report. You will see a stone-faced Chris there and me drinking because Chris cannot hear the jingle and I didn't know what else to do while the jingle played. So that's what you got. Hello and welcome to the LOC Report. It is now our third episode of the season and Chris is back yet again. How's it going, Chris?
Yeah, really well. It's surprising how the time really is flying at the moment. But you know, it's good to be able to break the week up with things like this. So can't believe it's Wednesday already, but
yeah, Wednesday. I've been furloughed nearly 2 months now. It's it does go, doesn't it? It does go. But you know, the time keeps going. The LOC doesn't stop. Neither does the NFL, for that matter. And of course, we'll be here today to give you the AGM download, which happened a few weeks ago. But before we get to that, Chris, how are you faring in the lockdown? Everything okay on your end?
Yeah, absolutely. I've been working a lot, and this working from home thing's really suited me. So
long may it continue.
I looked at my bank balance today, saving a lot of money.
That's what you like to see. Yeah, that's the funny thing as well. I was saying the other day, you know, even though I'm on the furlough thing and only get 8% of my salary, that my expenditures obviously plummeted as well. So and given the money I got back from things like the baseball tickets and whatnot, I've actually possibly even have more money than I would have, which is a nice.
It's absolutely absurd. It's amazing how much you spend on expendable things, you know. Going out and eating and whatever.
Absolutely.
That's it. So much of that can be saved. So maybe that's the thing to look at. But yeah, overall, apart from that, it's still not a massively good situation.
No, of course we want things to go back to normal. Absolutely, but we are.
100%. But here we are.
Here we are, making the best of it.
Still do things like this. Yes, absolutely.
Indeed.
We still do this, and we can still.
You know what else we can still do, Chris?
What's that?
The league news.
Yes, we can.
And so the top item on the league news, it remains as it also was on last week's podcast, which we'll come to in a second. But we broke last week that Coach Merritt is returning for another season in the LOC. So
yes.
Just give me your reaction on that, Chris.
I mean, it had to happen, really, didn't it? He can't go out the way he did. And to be honest with you, it wouldn't be quite the same without him. So, you know, I think good decision made all round.
Yeah.
And, you know, it definitely has this different perspective on things when he's watching games that we're watching. You know, it's whatever it is, 6 p.m. UK. He's watching them 12 hours ahead of us. So,
in the morning.
That's it. That to me seems great. I mean, you know, for him, the early games are the ones not to watch, and the late games are definitely the ones to watch. Being mid-morning in England, so I think that's a really, really interesting way of doing it. And yeah, I think it would be a much lesser place without him. So it's good that he's back.
Completely agree. And we will have to encounter whether he will be able to do the draft or not. But I told him it's not a problem if you can't, for obvious reasons. So absolutely. We're both absolutely ecstatic to have Phil back for another year. The next item, so the Hall of Fame nomination articles are all written now. As we said earlier, we will be doing a podcast on each of these this year, so starting next week, the first article will drop. I'll probably drop it on like a Monday or a Tuesday, and then we'll obviously come in with the podcast on a Wednesday or whatever, a day or two after. So that will be a good fun thing to do this off season, as we haven't really podcasted until late July, August in the last couple of seasons, have we?
Absolutely, worse, and we haven't. But then again, there hasn't really been a need to. But now, I mean, we've got plenty of time, and why not? You know, got to keep everyone entertained throughout the
throughout indeed, so, absolutely.
And having the 4 weeks or 5 weeks beforehand, before what we usually do, I think it's gonna be really exciting. So yeah, it should be good.
I haven't decided which one's going to drop yet, so well, it's a surprise to everyone which one is coming.
Nothing wrong with that.
Just a reminder again, the draft is the 29th of August. Do not double book that date. We will find a way, even if you can't be there physically, as none of us may be able to. But it will be happening on the 29th. And last week's episode, as I mentioned just now with the breaking news, LOC quiz. If you haven't done it, go and do it. I think, well, I've had good feedback from a couple of the guys so far. Chris, that's you included. And a couple of other guys didn't get a great score. I was just saying to Chris pre-airing, it was very difficult to balance it for the entire league's knowledge and experience of both the LOC and NFL. But go and have a go at it if you want. It will possibly be the backup to the backup of the division aligning event, so it may actually matter. We'll see. Hopefully we'll still get to do yours though, of course.
I hope so. That's it. You'd like to think it would be okay by then. But
we'll see. We if it looks like August time, we could probably stage it in some capacity. We'll have a good go at it then. So we'll revisit that, of course. And we will have debate corner today, but we'll have it after we've done the download, the recap of the AGM. And I have ripped the jingle now off of YouTube, so I don't have to frantically find the video and play an ad live on air.
Professional.
Exactly, yeah.
You look at the levels of professionalism.
Yeah, we're climbing. I've figured out the desktop audio. We're doing the whole podcast on a call. It's streaming all at the same time. I've even got an AirPod in, so the sound doesn't feed back. We are leaps and bounds ahead of where we were 6-7 years ago.
Oh, see, even a year or two.
Indeed.
This is a different world.
Sure is. And speaking of a different world, the AGMs do tend to create a completely new landscape for an LOC season at times. Just looking through the eyeglass of history, we obviously had keepers way back in, I can't even remember when we brought it in, 2012, something like that, which obviously left again. We transitioned to a 12-team league. We've had forfeit playoffs come and go, changing how the draft order is decided. We brought in the waiver budget system. We've made tweaks to that, and last year we arguably did our most radical yet, bringing in the super flex format. That was last year's AGM, and this AGM was no different entering it. It could have been a very turbulent one in the sense of lots of things could be changing, going back to the way they were or something new. But of course we did start with that big one that we had last year, Chris, in the new roster format, going from the traditional 2 running backs, 2 receivers, running back, receiver, flex, tight end, to our super flex format of you had 1 complete flex of running back, receiver, tight end, 2 wide receiver, tight end flexes, and then another 2 running back, receiver flexes. Now, I know you were obviously a big proponent of this, Chris. How did you feel that went in year 1?
Yeah, well, I think it went obviously quite well. But
in a general league view as well, personally, of course.
Absolutely. But aside from that, I've said it all along that having the way that we had it last year and the changes that we did gives a massive amount of flexibility to everyone. And as a result of that, you have less hold on positions, you have less hold on certain positions ruling the rosters, because in the past, if you didn't have a running back or even 2 dominant running backs, then you probably couldn't win the league. Well, that's not the case now. You could have 5 receivers and take all 5 receivers in the first 5 rounds, and you could be absolutely fine. And still have some to spare. So I think that initially people didn't quite get it, because it's something brand new. It's something that it takes time to get your head round. It feels as though the chains of the system you had previously were sort of loosened. But as time went on, people had a lot of different ways of approaching each game, and that's what I like, is that you get individual flair from each individual team to be able to do their own thing. You know, for me, my way of doing it was to have multiple tight ends. That's not necessarily the way everyone else went about it. But you know, so I think this year, after having a whole season of a system, people can now draft to that system as opposed to one that was there previously, which might well help. It also might throw some picks in the draft out completely. So there's some byproducts to be had there, and I think that's the more exciting thing about it, is that there's a world of unknown that comes from it, which stands to benefit us all. And as we saw last year, you know, there were particular bands of teams that did better than others, granted, but largely everything was reasonably tight. You know, not as tight as the year before, where, you know, so we had a lot of teams that were on the same sort of record, but last year wasn't a complete blowout. It wasn't as if, you know, there was one runaway team and everyone else was below. You know, there was probably 3 on one tier, 5 on the next, 4 on the one below.
Yeah.
And I think that now that people have got their head around how it's going to work and whatever, will undoubtedly bring everyone together again.
Yeah. Of course.
And that's the best thing about it.
Yeah.
And not only is it bring people together again, people can do it in a way that suits them, and suits a roster that they've got at the time, and that's the most impressive thing.
Yeah, well, the whole reason behind us bringing it in last year, of course, was look, we found when we moved to a 12-team league, naturally scoring was less, the waiver wire and such was more scarce, so that was an effort to kind of combat that. It obviously wasn't going to get the points and everything back to what they used to be, but from a competition point of view, it would mean slightly more players available. You could be a bit more judicial in who you play, and you're obviously not bound by position scarcity, which, you know, year one, I'd say success. We'll see if year two follows the same, or if it is something ridiculous. We'll find out, I'm sure. But I think, like you say, it will probably work. And really, I don't see why any fantasy league, given standard scoring systems, why this shouldn't be standard. It worked perfectly well. I think for a 10-team, the old system would be more suitable still, for obvious reasons. But for bigger leagues, this is absolutely the way forward. And speaking from experience, I just did a draft in a dynasty league that I was roped into, and it's ridiculous, the roster format for that. There are 12 teams in it. You have to play 3 receivers, 2 tight ends, a flex, 2 running backs. It's just insane. The guys you're drafting are stupid, but so for bigger leagues, it's the gold standard, as you say. I think we've stumbled upon, and I did know from members in the league who I talked to throughout the season and after the season that this wasn't necessarily something they were too keen on, let's say. But I was quite surprised that either people just changed their mind, or they actually liked it, or whatever. But it was a unanimous vote, apart from a couple of abstains, to keep the system. As we saw.
It's non-understanding. Non-understanding was a massive part of, I think, why people don't like something, and then once they get it, then they like it. It's the same thing in everything, you know. It's in many things in life. You know, you hate something until you know what you're doing, and then after that, and I think that's where and as I say, now that people can put their own individual flair on something rather than just be straight jackets into something that they don't necessarily like, that could only improve competition and only improve the game, and that's the key. For sure.
So the first item, the biggest item we had then, was to keep the team format as it was for at least another year. We will come back to it just as a make sure next year, but it's here for another year at least, and I'm sure more. The next thing we looked at was the waiver review. Again, this wasn't a big change. We tweaked it last year, where we doubled the funds for the bottom tier teams and the middle tier teams, from 5 to 10 for the middle tier and 10 to 20 for the bottom tier, and those are obviously done every other week from weeks 4 to 12. And again, year one of this, where we had some funds, it was liked, but it was actually felt in last year's AGM that it wasn't enough, so we doubled it, and this vote was completely unanimous to keep it as it was, 9-0. What do you make of this one?
Oh, never a more unanimous vote. Yeah, this is a system that's been honed over a course of 3 or 4 years, and you can tell that, and you can tell what works, and it just does. And it again, to improve competition, you've got to have bottom teams have got to have a chance to get those players on the waivers that are doing well. You can't just. I know that in the previous system that was possible as well. But this time, it's it. You pay what someone's worth to you. If that person happens to be, or that player happens to be worth, 30 or 40 credits to you, then that's fine. That's it. And if you want to pay that, then you crack on, because you're probably going to get that player. But not only does it help the bottom teams who, in middle part of the season, do have that much more money than some of the top teams, it does allow the top teams as well
to get that guy.
Get their guy. That's it. Which in the previous system wasn't necessarily the case. Yes, you would get to the point of the year where the same people will get the same waiver picks all over again, and just wasting them, not doing anything. With this, you can outbid someone, and it just makes it more fun. And there's a bit of jeopardy to it as well, because we see it in the in-season positivity. It's it. How many talking points are created by
for sure.
Somebody paying X amount of money for this guy. Is he worth it? Is he not? Yeah, so this guy gets picked up for a free. Is he better than the guy someone just spent 20 credits on? That generates some talking points. So yeah, I think from a publicity standpoint, what we're doing.
It's another layer. You're right. It's not just the player you've added or the player you've dropped. It's how much you've spent to get said player, or how cheaply you got said player in.
Exactly that. And there are some times where we ridicule that, but sometimes it works out. So yeah, I think that clearly people like that, and that's why it's here to stay for the foreseeable. I don't see that ever leave.
Yeah, I don't think. I even added a note on here. I have added no review in going seasons unless there's some great reason we feel to change it. But no, I completely agree. My massive bugbear with initially moving to the waiver system was it was too equal, and as we know, equality is everybody standing on the same size box. But if you're 5'5" and someone else is 6'10", they're going to have a better view of whatever you're looking at if there's an obstruction in the way. What we needed was equity, almost, where that tall guy, he's still going to get to that height, but you can give that shorter guy a bigger box so he can get to nearly the same level, or roughly the same level, and it's all equal, which I think it has achieved. So as you say, this is something we've been refining for a few years, so it's there now. So I think probably the most positive vote we've ever had in an AGM as well.
Oh, no doubt.
I should say as well that I can see there are maybe 1 or 2 viewers watching, so if you want to comment along or into the Facebook chat while we're going, please do. We'll read it out. Next thing we had on here, and this has been one that has bubbled it's been in the AGM, I think the last year or two, it's been discussed. And this is a playoff review, and in season pass we've decided to keep it as it is, because obviously right now we've obviously always had 14 games, and then 2 weeks of playoffs, 4 teams in. We didn't want to expand to 6 teams because that's half the league coming in. That's silly, and there was no real good way. But with the NFL soon to be adding an additional game to their regular season, we were suddenly presented with a scenario. Do we just keep it the same, or do we take advantage of this and somehow tweak the playoffs? And after some discussion, we did come up with 2 proposals. I guess there was a bit of a mood of some people were like, well, let's just have the 15th game. I don't think that was too strong. We didn't table a vote on it. Probably should have in hindsight, but I think it would have passed to have a modification to the playoffs anyway. And we had 2 proposals to vote on, which you can see this wall of text on your screen, but I'll basically explain. We had a Viv proposal, we called it, and a Dave and Ollie. Now the Viv proposal was both proposals were a 3-week playoff. But Viv's proposal was it would still only be 4 teams in the playoffs, but instead of the traditional first round, 1 plays bottom seed 4, and then the winner goes through and blah blah blah. It would actually, the first round would be between the first seed and the second seed, the winner of which would go straight to the Corona Bowl, the loser of which would then play the 4th seed. The 5th seed. This would be, I think this was a 5-team solution, wasn't it, Chris? No, that doesn't work like that. I can't. What did I write? I'm even getting muddled up now.
It's all right. That's it.
No, the first week it was 1v2 and then 3v4. The winner of 3v4 played the loser of 1v2, with the winner of 1v2 advancing straight to the Corona Bowl. So there were 2 games in the first week, which would be week 15 still, 1 game in week 16, and the championship week, which would still be the penultimate week in week 17. So that was proposal 1, where if you were the 1 or 2 seed, you would basically get a second chance if you lost. And the other proposal, Ollie and Dave's, which was but 5 teams would make the playoffs in this one, so this was a 5-team option. The first week would be between 2 wildcards effectively. You would have the traditional wildcard with the best record, if it's tiebreaker, most points. And then out of all already non-seeded playoff teams, so that's the division winners and that first wildcard, you would then have whoever had the highest most points. Those 2 would play each other. The winner of, and then after that, in week 16 and 17, it would be the traditional playoffs: 1 plays 4, 2 plays 3. So after we argued the toss for a bit, the vote did come out. It was very close. I think I did have the tie-breaking vote, and it was Ollie and Dave's proposal. Before we move on to that, well, what were your thoughts on Viv's proposal?
I thought it was an intriguing one. I mean, I have to say, I did like the idea of the first place, the first seed anyway, having a second chance. That to me was an intriguing prospect. And yeah, I think that most days that would have passed, but on this occasion, the second one passed, and we'll see why in a moment. Because I think there was more of a perceived value in some of the things that were discussed in that one. Say it's all very well being the first seed, but actually, aside from that, there's not a lot of gain. And especially if you're the losing 3rd or 4th seed, then you have to go quite a long way to be able to get to the Corona Bowl. So yeah, I think it was it explored an option, and it got people thinking.
Absolutely.
And and the next bit is sort of a development onto that.
Yeah, for sure.
Which is the one that passed.
Yeah. Before we move on to that one, I think the main reason why I think even after 1 or 2 people who voted that actually did have a change of heart and did prefer the other one, because we talked about the sanctity of, look, we've changed the league, keepers, number of teams, yada yada, rosters. So the sanctity of the league was your argument for changing the playoffs, which I also like. 14-game season works very well scheduling wise for a 12-team league. You play your division twice and everyone else once. It's all neat, it's all tidy. Another regular season game would have messed with that. But as you said as well, but that also messes with supposedly the sanctity of what's come before, as much as there is sanctity in the changing landscape. But that has always been a constant. So that was one kind of knock. That's the knock that I think was also there with Viv's proposal, is because traditional playoffs, it's a win or go home scenario. We see most years, in fact, that the good teams can just have a bad week, they fall into the playoffs or whatever, or they just get beaten by a team that has a great day, and that's kind of almost the romance of the playoffs, right? So having that second chance for that first and second seed, it's a bit, it kind of messes with the sanctity of the playoffs, because it's like, well, hang on a minute, no one gets a second chance in the playoffs. It's win or go home. So that was one argument. But the proposal that did pass was Ollie and Dave's, as you said, and so tell us why you think this one was the more popular.
Well, I think that there is a greater value on winning a division as a result of this, and at the moment there isn't really anything apart from a playoff berth, that allows you to do that. So at least then, this time, you see, you reward the real winners, and then after that, yes, it's a bit of a bum fight. But having that extra team in there, in the second option, allows for greater manoeuvrability. So, like, for example, last year I said, that Dave was hard done by, and I said, funny enough, we'll have to get Ben on at some point to do something. He did some statistical analysis, which basically, right, and it's very interesting. he basically looked back over Dave's like last season in this new playoff system, and had Dave been involved as we want to be, as the highest scoring team, as the 5th place wildcard, which is the main reason why this passed, by the way, because that is a very, very exciting option.
Yeah.
If David made it as the 5th place wildcard, he would have made the Corona Bowl. Wouldn't have won, but he'd made the Corona Bowl.
Interesting.
Interesting.
Which is
he's got some stats and spreadsheets, so I have to get him on to present them because they were interesting. But there could be new finalists, new winners from everywhere. If you've got a particularly explosive team, but you just get particularly unlucky, and that's the reason this is the insurance playoff spot.
Exactly. Yeah.
And I think that everybody who's been in that position before, has wanted that, or has hoped that would be a case or a spot in the past.
Yeah.
Hasn't necessarily been there. So to have your 3 playoff winners plus your wild card plus the highest points scored in the year, duking it out in a 5-seed playoff, that to me is not only is it exciting, it increases the likelihood of another team winning the Corona Bowl.
Yeah.
But also it's more fun because throughout the year you're going to want to be the highest scoring team just in case. So you're going to want to play your best team every week. You're not going to want to give up three weeks to the end of the season because you've got a terrible record. You're going to want to score some points. And it throws in a completely different perspective in the playoffs themselves. I think that's the reason why it passed, and I'm excited to play that. Maybe not this year, but maybe next year.
Yeah.
As a result, because it makes things more competitive and more exciting just from off of that.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, no, you make some very good points. The reasons the vote was so split, I think this would have been a more popular option, but there were some people that were still very much in the camp of, well, do you really want to let another team into the playoffs? Because it's not half the league, but it's obviously, the step before half the league. And if you did a traditional wildcard, well, you might say, well, does that team really deserve to get in? And there was the equal argument of, well, just because you've scored the most points doesn't necessarily, abdicate your poor record or whatever. I think in most cases where the teams have had the most points but not made it, their record has been, I'm going to put a guess out and say probably 6-8. I think I was 6-8 that year where I had the highest scoring team and didn't make the playoffs. So those teams aren't typically that bad, and the main argument we had to push that forward was, well, while we all like to gesture and say, we're playing each other, as opposed to an NFL team where, it's not, points forward is a pointless metric because it's all about did you win the games, because you can control what your opponent does. Fantasy, you cannot control what your opponent does. We like to make a big deal of it and say, it's versus, but really you are, in effect, playing yourself in a way each week. So, as you say, it's a nice way to kind of give a reward to a team that's, had a really good season but maybe some bad luck, but they do have the toughest road to the Corona Bowl still. They would have to win 3 games to win it all, as opposed to the 2 if you're a division winner under the new format, which is right, because in the NFL playoffs, if you are a division, if you're a 1 or 2 seed, you get a bye. If you're the 3 or 4 seed that won your division, you still get a home game. So there is some tangent advantage there, and likewise, as you said, that 4th wildcard team under the old format, they didn't win their division. They weren't the best team out of it, but they could just have 2 good games and get through and win in the final, which, you got there, fair enough, but this just makes it a bit harder, a bit, more punishing, let's say, because we do see quite often the division winners and the first seeds go out of the playoffs without winning it. Like, it's actually, I would say, more rare for those teams to win it, usually.
There's no doubt, and I think if you said to anybody who deserves to be in the playoffs, you would say three teams that win a division, the best record and the highest points scored. You have to think that has every single metric you possibly want in there.
Yeah.
Except maybe because points against. So what you said, you can't control that.
Yeah.
You are rewarding the things that you can control, and there's so many people that get through the season with low points against and gypsy a few wins. and come to a decent record, and they're in playoff contention. And we say this every year in the pod. How does that happen?
Yeah.
How can teams, that score highly, that just get shat on from a great height, finish with a lesser record than people who gypsy wins? And a lot of it is the division you're in and the teams you're against year on year. I get that.
Yeah.
And that's where you get most of your wins from. But saying that, I just think that this is more competitive, for sure.
Yeah.
And and I did hear a nice little thing the other day. Whereas if it happens and does pass, then Viv's got his rule, the old Nafwani rule. But this should be the Dave Stubbs law, really, shouldn't it?
Let's call it that. It's the Dave Stubbs law. We can call that first round of the playoffs the Dave Bowl. Between the wild cards, just to commemorate that week was his brainchild, and Ollie's, of course.
Absolutely.
So yeah, that did pass. That will be the playoff format, not until the NFL extends their regular season, though. We will stick in the current format until that is the case. That could be as soon as next year, but could be a season or two even after that. We also have noted down, quite conveniently, I think it was actually good at the time. I had forgotten the NFL wasn't bringing this in straight away, but I think it's also good that we figured it out now and that we can review it again next year. Just as are we still happy with this? And I expect people will be, but it's good to have it there because it is quite a seismic change. We haven't messed with schedule or playoffs or anything so far in the league's history. This is the first time we've tweaked anything like that. So I think that's a good check to have. But as you say, we're all about competitiveness and excitement in the league, and I think the additional playoff spot and the way we've done it will certainly do that. And the division winners get a little bit of reward where they didn't before. So our next article then was that was pretty much the bulk of the interesting stuff in the AGM over. So that the playoff thing was the only real change, but that obviously won't hit this season, so no real changes for this season. The next thing we talked about was DST scoring review, and we discussed only a slight tweak, removing the yardage points. We did table any other suggestions, but I don't think there were any from memory. Just to kind of, we saw last year with the Patriots, they had an insane year. There's always a defense each year that does ridiculous things, and we discussed removing yardage as a possible way to peg defenses back slightly. Just to summarise, and you can give your take on it, Chris. But what we kind of felt was that it was it's basically the PPR argument where you make the rich richer and you don't really boost enough of the poor people up enough. That would be what taking yardage is away. You take that yardage away, and it might peg back the best defenses a bit, but it's also going to peg back the other defenses by a bit as well. So it didn't really set out to achieve it. We are different to the standard leagues, having the yardage points. They are harder, I would say, to attain than the points, if that makes sense. But ultimately, I think this is also a first in the AGM. We had a 3-way tie between yes, no, and abstain. So wacky AGM this was. What was your take on this one, Chris?
Yeah, for me, I don't think it would make a massive difference. I mean, yes, it would probably eliminate the regularity we see double-digit defense points. You'd have to have a really good week to get to double figures at that point. But ultimately, does it matter? Does it matter? Not really. And if you support your linebackers, which every good person does, then you're gonna love the fact that it's stayed the same. So. Yeah. It's not sexy, it's not exciting, but perhaps it's something that we don't want to push it too far. And it's as I say, it's always been the same, and we said about the sanctity of scoring, I suppose.
Sure. Yeah.
Which remains the same. So there's no point changing it at this point. When we're wanting to promote scoring more points, we're going to take it more.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and that's a very good point, because this was standard at a point in NFL fantasy leagues, and I think when they moved over to the new system or something, they changed their defense to not have the yardage points, and I at that point put them back in, given we are a custom league, because I thought, well, why would you take them out? And I'm still pretty much on that camp. I think I just cherry picked a few weeks last season, and I think the Patriots scored 42 points in 1 week. This is the one that sticks out for me. And I looked, okay, how many would they have scored if you took the yardage points away? They would have scored 35. So, yes, they got 7, which I suppose it's a beefy amount. You know, it's worth a touchdown, essentially. But I think to get 7, you have to hold a team under 200 yards. That's combined, rushing and passing. That does not happen a lot in the NFL, even for the Patriots defense. So, really, like you say, you're not really moving the needle. We want to score more points anyway. And ultimately, you know, touchdowns, interceptions, sacks, whatnot, are what you get the bulk of your defense points from usually anyway. So that is here to stay, and we won't revisit that again unless there is need to. But we did play with some of the, let's say, utility points. As our next item that we had was talking about negative kicker points. This was raised in the Any Other Business, I think, in the 2019 AGM, and we just discussed it again if we wanted to change the kicker points. And what we ultimately fell on was 1 additional point for a 40 to 49 yard field goal, which sounds kind of funny on the surface, but you obviously get that 5 points for hitting that 50 yard field goal. 40 to 49, it's makeable, but it's certainly not an easy one, but under 39 and under, you know, is a pretty easy field goal, and it's not too different from a PAT either now. So 1 additional point for kickers for 40 to 49. We love a kicker here in the LOC.
Oh yes, that's it. Well, and it makes a massive difference. You know, it's the amount of times that you see, you know, a couple of teams falling short by 3 or 4 points, and that's one way they can bridge the gap. So another positive move. You know, so again, increasing the points scored, nothing wrong with that. However, that's it. The next bit, the -1 point for a missed PAT. Now, if you're a professional kicker, in my opinion, that's it. If you miss a PAT, that's a joke, right? So that's it. I'm all in on the -1 point for the missed PAT, but obviously everyone else wants to be, you know, a bit pro kicker. You know, that's it. People have bad days. So.
If it was you know, the old school style PAT where it was literally a 19-yard field goal, I think we would, at this time in the LOC, all be on board with that, because it would be utterly hilarious, and it arguably is deserved of it. But right now it's is it a 32-yard field goal effectively? Is it the 15 they do it from? I can't remember. It's either a 32 or a 27-yarder, so it's not close, but it's certainly, as you say, within capable range for a kicker. Yes, they might miss the odd few, but we kind of looked at it under the hat of, you know, you're already effectively getting a -1 for them missing it anyway. It would be effectively -2 if you chucked another, which takes away almost a field goal, you know, just for missing a PAT. So we don't have any quirky things like that, and this one did not make it. But you can see it was close. It was 4 to 5 in favour of no. Then we had a few other quick things. The division review, we just wanted to keep it as it was. It does work quite nicely, as I say, with the scheduling and everything else. The Thwani rule, which was not enacted last year, which is, of course, the regular season winner gets to, on draft, or I think we kept this as on draft day, I think. Say if they wanted to swap their draft slot with another team, we obviously brought this in because the regular season winner doesn't really have a benefit. My initial idea was to try and get the playoffs to provide that benefit, but that didn't come off. They do have a benefit, but so do the other 2 division winners, so the Thwani rule stays, and maybe we'll see Ben actually use it this year after Viv did not use it the year previous.
Unbelievable. Didn't use your own rule. I hope that he wins the regular season again so he can use it one day.
Yeah, it would be nice, wouldn't it? So after that we had the elections, and I think this is the smoothest elections we've ever had. All the positions were stood for by a candidate. All of the candidates received all of the votes, which, again, I don't think has ever happened.
Stunning. So democracy in action there.
Yeah, indeed. So that was the summary from the 2020 AGM, the download. What did you make of it, Chris?
That's it. It wasn't very revolutionary. I think that the playoffs, if we're coming in this year, I might have a bit more of a sunny story to tell. But I hope that next year we'll be able to see that fruit of that debate. But a lot of the stuff that we've brought in over the last couple of years has clearly worked, and I think that that forum is one that should continue to exist because good ideas that improve the game come out of it.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's it. It's also good to catch up once in a while.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So yes, nothing revolutionary, but it doesn't need to be at this point.
No.
We're really good at this.
Yeah, I completely agree. Another calm year until we obviously fiddle a bit with the playoffs, but yeah, we haven't really had a still year as such. Outside of the kicker point, nothing really is changing this season. We'll see what coronavirus has to say about that, but whatever. So yeah, that was the 2020 AGM, and like I said earlier, I've shifted Debate Corner to the end of this show, and I do have the jingle now, so me and Chris are about to move into Debate Corner.
Yes.
Order.
You couldn't hear it, Chris, but I was having a nice jig to the. You remember the snazzy drop I have for the Debate Corner.
How could you forget?
Yeah, so we are in Debate Corner, and I toyed with what to do Debate Corner this year. I was like, what was the most interesting thing or something from the AGM, but there wasn't really anything groundbreaking other than the playoffs, but that's not here this year. So I thought I'd bring up an old chestnut, which I thought I had on the agenda, but I remember I did take off deliberately, and that is PPR. I knew you were going to have that face as soon as I mentioned that, and that's why I took it off, and that's why it's also the feature of Debate Corner. As I said, we did the positional changes to make it a bit more competitive, and like my gripe with the Dynasty League, where there's a stupid amount of positions, the one good thing in those bigger leagues is they are PPR, so it actually does make it a little easier to be able to field a team and have good points. But here in the LOC, we have been firmly anti-PPR, most of us. We've tabled a few votes on it, and we both feel there's no good reason to bring in PPR in the current format. So today's Debate Corner is going to be about PPR in the 2021 AGM, possibly. What do you think?
Well, look, a lot of the leagues, I suppose the material that you read about doing your research throughout the year, a lot of them base their points on PPR. Now, look, you got to see through that. If you want to do the best way to do your research is doing your own research. Don't take someone's word for it. And that's the first gripe that I've got, is that just because the whole world's doing something differently, doesn't mean that
the landscape has very much moved. The NFL standard is now PPR. I'm fairly certain nearly all of the major ones are now their standard is PPR as well. Half point PPR at least.
Yeah, and the reason why that is because they have a view, which I don't agree with, that it makes all players somehow relevant. Which they do have a sort of a point, but why does anybody want to take a third receiver who gets 5 looks a game and gets 5 points?
Yeah, this is the thing, isn't it?
Why would you?
Yeah, you have guys like a Julian Edelman would be a great example, where he's probably been a low end mid wide receiver 2 for most of his starting career in New England. But if you were in a PPR league, half or full, he is probably boosted to the top end of a wide receiver 2, even the low end wide receiver 1. Then you have the argument of, you have guys like Jarvis Landry when he was in Miami especially, and these other slot guys around the NFL. One doesn't spring to mind right now.
Adam Humphries. Humphries would be an absolute legend in PPR.
Yeah.
He probably is, right? But what does he do for the Titans week in, week out? He doesn't do anything. If you like a pass-catching running back, which, let's be honest, there's no one who's really that sexy pass-catching running back apart from McCaffrey and Saquon. Those guys who are unbelievable anyway are going to be even more unbelievable.
Exactly.
In PPR.
Like a Julio Jones or Hopkins. These guys, Michael Thomas as well, especially. Look at Michael Thomas last year.
Oh my God, Michael Thomas is just absurd. That's it. And we think that he's good now, right? And he's an asset. that would be absolutely ridiculous.
Yeah.
So yeah, there is an element of that where the best players, especially number one receivers, especially locked in number one receivers, get better, way better, inflated beyond belief.
Mm-hmm.
You then have a lot of irrelevant slot guys. Cole Beasley is another one. So Cole Beasley in PPR is like the man. You know, and you think to yourself, why am I playing this guy? And it's only because it's not because of anything particularly fancy. It's not because that he's making great plays. It's because he's just plays the position.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's it. Having everyone relevant is not fun.
No, you certainly have expressed and portrayed quite well. The pro camp of PPR is, like you say, it does bring more players into relevance. It does make the rich richer at the same time, but you do get guys like James White and Cole Beasley and whatnot, as you've already said, that do come into fantasy relevance, which I guess for the interest of competitiveness, I guess, but I'm still with you that in our league at least, I don't know why it ever even became a thing. It's like, great, you caught a ball, have a point. You might have got no yards or negative yards, but you're going to get a point or a half point. But what's the point? Are you going to give a point per rush to a running back? Like, what? Yeah. You know, there was an interesting idea that I heard on Fantasy Podcast a few years ago with, you know, you have these pounding running backs that, you know, they're just short yardage specialists, get over the goal line. Well, would you give a point for them earning a first down? And I actually thought, you know, well, that's quite an interesting dynamic because something like that, gaining a yard is a tangible objective benefit in the NFL. Getting a first down is a tangible objective benefit in the NFL. Catching a ball is not. It's a prerequisite to that, but it doesn't, you know, like I said, you could get nowhere with it. So it's just because you get peppered with targets or whatever, I'm with you at the moment, at least. So I can't see it entering the LOC next year or for the next few years, but
I don't see that. I just cannot fathom at the moment. If you have the system we have plus PPR, I mean, we're just talking crazy scores. So yeah, the sooner we can ward that away from the door, the better.
Yeah, I agree. So we are leaving debate corner now. Thank you, John Burkow, as always, for having us in here. And that is the end of the podcast as well. I think, like I said to you earlier, Chris, it was going to be a relatively short one. Short is. Well, by our standards, it's short, perhaps not by normal standards, but, you know, it's not even half 8, so that's a win in my book. So thank you for watching, Chris. Thank you for joining, as always. We will be back next week, as I say, with the start of the Hall of Fame nominations, so you've got a good couple of months ahead of you with those. But with that, I will say goodbye. Chris, thank you for joining.
Welcome. Take it easy.
Yeah, we'll see you next week. Have a good one, guys.